On 7 and 8 October 2019, we at the auction house Künker will hold our auction 326. At the auction, a wide selection of Roman coins will be on offer. In this podcast, we want to make use of this fact in order to tell you something about the coins of the 5 good emperors. Here in Germany, collectors do not know this term. They name this period the time of adoptive emperors, and they include Commodus too. As auction house Künker is located in the German city of Osnabrück, we follow this tradition. Our podcast covers the time between 96 and 192. Domitian, the last emperor of the Flavian dynasty, was assassinated on 18 September 96. That was 27 years after the end of the civil war that had followed the murder of Nero. Therefore, every senator knew from his own experience what it meant when Rome was torn in pieces by a civil war. Nobody wanted to experience that again. They preferred to agree on a compromise candidate. The Senate elected Nerva. He was old and had no children. That meant that any ambitious senator could hope to become his successor. Moreover, on his mother's side, Nerva was very distantly related to the first emperor Augustus. This was a strong argument in favor of Nerva, and he even used coins to spread this fact among the people. This sestertius, featuring the portrait of Divus Augustus, was made under Nerva's rule. Nerva celebrated himself as the man who had put an end to Domitian's tyranny. This Asarius depicts Libertas, the goddess of liberty. She holds a pileus. In the daily life, this was a symbolic item used during the ceremony of freeing a slave. Nerva owed his success to the Senate, but he needed the military in order to remain emperor. That's what this coin tells us about. It postulates unity with the army through the timeless gesture of a handshake. However, this unity was not in a good state. That's why Nerva adopted a very popular general. His name was Trajan. His family came from the Spanish town Italica. His father had come to Rome and had had a successful career. Since he was Titus' brother-in-law, he and his sons were favorites of the Flavians. Yes, Trajan was one of Domitian's advisors, but this would not be mentioned publicly because the assassinated emperor had been condemned to damnatio memoriae. Trajan became the type of emperor that senators loved: predictable, reasonable, modest, and in touch with the people. There are endless anecdotes about him. Until the modern era, he was considered the ideal emperor. Only when people started to question the role of war as a means of politics in the middle of the 20th century, his image changed. Trajan was all about the military. Under his rule, the Roman Empire reached its greatest extent. He conquered the legendary rich territory of Dacia and was therefore honored with the title Optimus Princeps, the best ruler. For Rome, this victory resulted in immeasurable wealth. Dacia's treasures were enough to mint about 31.5 million aurei, or 160 million denarii, an enormous amount of money. A legionary earned 300 denarii per year. Trajan used the money to restructure Rome. He built Thermae, an aqueduct, a new forum, a new street. In short, major parts of the Rome we know today originate from him. Unfortunately, Trajan liked military campaigns better than the civilian life. Therefore, he started the war against the Parthians, an undertaking that had already caused others to fail. But when Trajan set out in the autumn of 113, the Parthian king was swallowed up by a civil war. Look at this coin. We don't know whether it was minted by King Pacorus or by anti-King Vologases III. We also don't know when exactly the rule of Pacorus was passed to his brother Osroes. In any case, Trajan was able to establish new provinces with names like Armenia, Mesopotamia, and Assyria in the short term. This coin depicts him in the middle of the rivers Euphrates and Tigris, the defeated Armenia at his feet. But the Parthians reconquered their territories. Additionally, unrest erupted in several Roman provinces. The campaign had failed. Trajan set off on his return journey. He did not make it back to Rome. In Cilician Selinus, he died unexpectedly of a stroke. His great-nephew Hadrian inherited the rule. He was also military trained, and he demonstrates that fact on this aureus with the depiction of the god Mars in full armor. However, Hadrian's beard conveys a different message. In this way, the new emperor showed from the beginning that he was a little bit different from the average senator. Hadrian was a cosmopolite. He became a traveling emperor, a ruler who wanted to explore all of his provinces in person. This is evidenced by the extensive series of coins that deal with the provinces he traveled to. Here we see Africa holding the cornucopiae. She is wearing the scalp of an elephant and holds a scorpion. Behind her, we can see a basket filled with grain. This coin celebrates Hadrian as a restitutor, as a rebuilder. Also, this type was produced for different provinces. Once again, we can see Africa with the scalp of an elephant, this time on her knees, who is lent a helping hand by Hadrian. Hadrian loved Egypt with all of his heart, and this love is reflected by his coins. This sestertius is dedicated to the Nile. Of course, you know the romantic story about Antinous, the dearly beloved friend of Hadrian. He died in the waters of the Nile. While the senators had understood someone like Trajan, the urban Hadrian scared them. He granted the provinces more rights at the expense and to the annoyance of the established upper class in Rome. This coin proves that even Hadrian experienced some moments of failure. It was minted by Shimon bar Kokhba in the second year of Israel's freedom. Therefore, it is a testimony to the Second Jewish War that had been caused by a well-intentioned law of Hadrian. Hadrian had forbidden any operation on the male member. He actually wanted to prevent the castration of slaves, but at the same time he made Jewish circumcision impossible. This deeply interfered with the identity of many Jewish people. They began a terrible war that ended in 135 with the destruction of Jerusalem. Only 1 year later, Hadrian fell seriously ill. He retired to his beloved palace in Tivoli and named Lucius Aelius his successor. But the latter died only 2 years later, and Hadrian had to deal once again with the difficult question of his succession. Few months before his death, he adopted Antoninus Pius. We don't know why Hadrian chose Antoninus Pius. Perhaps because both of them lacked any kind of military ambition. Moreover, Hadrian protected Rome from a civil war by having childless Antoninus Pius adopt 2 young men, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. One was the child of a family from Spain with close connections to Hadrian, the other the son and heir of Aelius, who had died in 138. The Romans considered the rule of Antoninus Pius to be the happiest time of their history. Even though the emperor is depicted here as a general, those were times of peace. Antoninus Pius focused on matters of domestic politics and administration, and both worked perfectly. Antoninus Pius was able to produce a rich coinage. Many designs refer to the past of the Roman Empire or to the Roman virtues. Here we see a goddess that Pius worshipped particularly, Pietas. The goddess of righteousness protects 3 helpless children and, at the same time, holds the globe in her hand. The safety of the earth is guaranteed by the wise rule of the emperor. That's also the message conveyed by this aureus. But even though Victoria seems to celebrate the emperor's victories with a trophy on this aureus, the army became the poor relation. Antoninus Pius cut the troops' strength and the costs. He was fortunate because nobody attacked the Roman Empire during his rule. This changed under the rule of Marcus Aurelius. With his rule, the migration period began, and thus also the decline of the Roman Empire. Nevertheless, for centuries, he was considered the best emperor, and there was a reason for it. He made the dream of all Stoic philosophers come true, a philosopher on the emperor's throne. Christianity adopted this theory. Marcus Aurelius was almost considered a Christian emperor, although he would have strictly forbidden this during his lifetime. Marcus Aurelius shared his duties with his brother. That was new. All emperors had been in need of help and had showered those who helped them with honors. As long as it was evident who had the most titles, the hierarchy was clear, and Marcus Aurelius took great care to always have a few more titles than Lucius Verus. Look at these 2 coins from 166-7. Even though both rulers had been proclaimed imperator for the 4th time and had been elected consul for the 3rd time, Marcus Aurelius was superior. He was tribune of the people for the 22nd time, Lucius Verus only for the 7th time. In Roman times, this was of crucial importance for the hierarchy. That's why Lucius Verus was the one who had to go east to fight the Parthians. This coin commemorates the decisive victory of 166. On Victoria's shield you can read, "Victory over the Parthians." But the returning troops brought a devastating plague into the Roman Empire. It killed innumerable people and depopulated entire regions. The empty land attracted the Germanic tribes beyond the Limes. Lucius Verus died at the beginning of 169. Therefore, Marcus Aurelius had to go to war himself to fight back the Germanic people. On this coin, we see him in the typical pose of a general, his hand raised in the gesture of speech. The coin was minted after the victory over the invaders in 173-4. Nevertheless, the emperor did not return to Rome. He wanted to annex the former regions of the Marcomanni and the Quadi as new provinces to the Roman Empire. Marcus Aurelius died during these attempts in 180, somewhere at the front. We don't know whether it was in Vienna or in or around Sirmium. He was succeeded by his son Commodus. The new emperor was realistic and refused to annex new provinces that could only be held at high expense. This behavior did not win sympathies in Rome, but there was no money. Commodus wasn't even able to give the soldiers the usual gift of money when he came into power. And on top of that, his ambitious sister Lucilla initiated a palace revolution. The plan was discovered, the culprits were punished, and yet the 22-year-old Commodus developed a paranoia. He fled into fantasies, stylized himself as a Roman Hercules, and behaved in a way that was unpredictable, even for his closest friends. Long story short, he had to disappear. Therefore, on 31 December 192, a wrestler was led into the private chambers of the emperor. He strangled Commodus. More than a century had passed after the assassination of Nero. Nobody who had witnessed a civil war and who would try to prevent one was still alive. So nobody wanted to make a compromise. And that's why the following period went down in history as the crisis of the 3rd century. We at Auction House Künker are pleased to invite you to Osnabrück for our October auction 2019. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us.